Bitcoin is breaking down from its range low support at 91K. It's an absolute bloodbath across the crypto markets. I actually spoke about this level yesterday and I said if we broke down, things would likely get ugly. And looking across the market, things are getting ugly. So in today's video, I want to go through exactly what my thoughts are, what's triggering this dip, what could potentially happen next. Are we going to get a quick recovery? Is this going to be a really slow recovery? What's my outlook for the market over the next few months? And importantly, what am I doing today to capitalize on this dip? I'll tell you right now, I have made some very big moves. In fact, I've made the biggest buys that I've made in over a month on a couple of specific altcoins, which we'll discuss later in the video because I think the risk reward here is really, really good. But I'm not just longing any old altcoin right now because you have to be really, really selective with what you actually buy the dip on, because we've seen over the past few months, if you just keep buying dips and catching knives, you'll just keep getting burnt and burnt and burnt. So over the past couple of months in particular, I've been very, very selective about when I buy. If you've been watching the channel, you'll know that I've been really selective with the days that I've actually gone heavy into the market. I can count on one hand, really, the days that I've made significant buys over the last 5 months, and today is actually one of those days. So I want to discuss why that's the case, what I bought, but importantly, what's going to happen to the market in general, because Bitcoin is not looking good right now. And obviously it's flirting with danger. Having an ongoing breakdown on the daily of a very, very key support level, actually a range that Bitcoin has been in for over 100 days. It's the longest range we've had since that range of the summer last year, which drove people absolutely mad. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Firstly, I want to just start by discussing Bitcoin. Then we're going to get into why this dip is happening, what are the reasons. Then I'm going to go into whether I think a bottom is forming, whether I think now's a good time to be buying altcoins or whether you should wait. And then I'm going to get into exactly the altcoins that I bought and what I'm currently trading right now. It is going to be a banger show. I did put a lot of time and effort into preparing this. I've been pretty much at my desk all day as well in the Discord. We're doing an AMA after this. I've been trading. I've been managing my portfolio. It's been a very, very crazy day. So if you do enjoy updates like this on crazy days, make sure you are subscribed. Smash the like button, by the way. Show some love by smashing the like button for this video, which I think is going to be a good one and is going to help you guys out a lot. And of course, have that post notification bell on, because in a market like this, you need to be staying on top of things. And I'm going to be here every day to keep you on top of things. Things are definitely evolving very, very quickly. So I'll definitely be uploading tomorrow, the day after, because I think it's important to keep you guys in the loop right now. I'm seeing a lot of other YouTubers go ghost. Many of the big channels aren't even uploading at the moment, which I find very surprising, because now is really the time where you need to be very alert, taking advantage of opportunities that are presenting, but also protecting capital at the same time when certain setups start to break down. I'll discuss some of the major setups. I'll show you Sonic, I'll show you Solana, Tau, Hyperliquid, all of these coins that you guys want to know about. We're going to chart them later in today's video as well. But firstly, starting with Bitcoin, because this controls the entire market. Crypto is basically like a house of cards, right? When Bitcoin does well, you know, the house stays intact. And when Bitcoin starts to break down or show weakness right now, because the dominance is in favor of Bitcoin, the house of cards starts to collapse, right? And really, this is one of the fundamental reasons why I think altcoins are collapsing. It's because they front ran this Bitcoin breakdown. So Bitcoin over the last few days has been looking really weak, flirting with a potential breakdown. You had lower highs, you had a compression, then you had a breakdown to the downside, and then this daily candle today takes us below the range low. And because Bitcoin was flirting with danger, many people preemptively sold their altcoins, and I guess it was a good decision if you were doing that, you know, a couple of days ago to protect against the breakdown, which we ended up getting. But I actually think if Bitcoin keeps going to the downside, yes, alts will bleed, but I think a lot of the selling in terms of the aggregate amount of sales, obviously percentage-wise, coins are going to drop, but the vast majority of sales have probably already taken place on the de-risk on this initial breakdown. So even if Bitcoin did go to 85 or a bit lower to 84, and we'll talk about some of the lower targets I do have and where I would actually buy Bitcoin later in today's video, I don't think the altcoin dip would be as bad as some people think, because alts are very reflexive and the markets are forward-looking. So the second there's a bit of weakness, the sell-off happens really quick and it gets priced into into the market really quick. And that's why we've had a big liquidation cascade today. $1.5 billion wrecked over the last 24 hours. Bitcoin obviously being the major culprit, but altcoins like Ethereum, XRP, Solana, all having multi-million-dollar liquidation days. It's one of the biggest liquidation events that we've had over the past year. And you can definitely see it on the charts, and you can definitely see it on the timeline in terms of the sentiment. Now, in terms of potential targets for Bitcoin to the downside, Jason Pizzino does point out that we do have a CME gap for Bitcoin at 78 to 80K. Now, there's no guarantee that we're going to go to this level, so I wouldn't necessarily be planning your entire strategy around the gap fill, but it is important to prepare for a potential scenario where Bitcoin could go to 78 to 80K. And any altcoin that I'm buying right now, and any altcoin that I'm trading right now, I'm doing so with the framework of, okay, there is a potential that this breakdown ends up confirming on the daily and the weekly later in the week, and we actually do go lower. So I think that's really the crux of things right now. Bitcoin needs to show that this move below range low is a deviation. So this liquidation wick has to be like the prior liquidation wicks, which ends up getting gobbled up over the next couple of days, and we see consolidation or acceptance back into the range. If we don't get acceptance back into the range and we form a base below the range, I'm willing to bet 90% chance we do go lower, and we potentially do look at the low 80s gap fill that Jason Pizzino does point out. So a lot of my framework in the short term is going to depend on how Bitcoin reacts over the next 48 hours. Obviously, the weekly close is going to be a much higher confidence close. So if we do close below on the weekly, that's like confirmation that the range low has broken. If we close below on the daily, it's minor confirmation, but it is potentially salvageable. I've definitely seen many times where Bitcoin has closed below on the daily. We saw it back in this range, right? Where we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days below, and then we reclaimed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then reclaimed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, reclaimed. But that's very rare to happen on the weekly. If you look at the weekly chart, there was only one weekly candle which flirted with the close below. All of the others actually closed above. So I think it's a similar scenario now. You just don't want that weekly close below. Obviously, it's going to be a long week. There's lots of macro data coming this week. Daily is doable without officially confirming the breakdown. Obviously not ideal, but weekly would probably be a bit of a death blow and result in a potential scenario down to 80K. So my framework is it could happen. Now, if it does happen, I'm not saying it will. It could. As a trader, you got to be prepared for that in the market. A lot of crypto trading is about saying, okay, this might happen. If it does, what would I do? And this might happen. If it does, what would I do? There's no absolutes in crypto. There's only probabilities, and you have to prepare for both eventualities. And just as there's a chance that we close below and we end up filling the gap, there's also a very strong chance that we bounce here and reclaim, and this is deviation that shakes a lot of people out. And the reasons I made some moves that I'll talk about later in today's video is on the basis that there is still a very strong probability that we could bounce off range low. And I'm sorry for anyone in the comments like, oh, Mars, you're not definitively telling us whether we're going to bounce here or not. Because I would be stupid to definitively tell you. If I actually came out and said, oh, Bitcoin is going to bounce here and here's why, that would be dumb. And that just shows I know nothing about the market because it's all probabilities. And we'll get into my probabilistic view on things and why I made some altcoin moves later in the altcoin section of the video. But the main point I wanted to get across in this Bitcoin section of the show was that 78 to 80 is that gap fill zone that if we close below on the weekly is your next support. And that is a very, 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 very strong support in my opinion, and actually would be a level where I consider adding long-term Bitcoin exposure, because I haven't added to my long-term Bitcoin portfolio since I think September last year at 55K. I don't really like buying long-term Bitcoin after big pumps. I really like buying extreme fear on my long-term Bitcoin. And for that reason, I would probably wait for 78 to 80K before adding to my long-term Bitcoin bags. Until then, I'll just play alts off their key high time frame levels. And there's certainly a few of those levels that we got today. And it's why I actually made some moves. Looking at Bitcoin, in terms of the trend, you can see here, it has started to break the 21 weekly EMA, which is a key bull market band. Now, the thing to note is that last summer, we actually did break below for a few weeks before confirming above. So if we do trade a little bit below, it's not to say that the bull market is over from a Bitcoin perspective. Altcoins are in a completely different cycle, but the Bitcoin bull market is technically still intact. Now, of course, if we started making lower lows and then lower lows again on the weekly, and we probably won't know until we're around 80K, then you could assert that the bull market is probably over. But all of this is going to be in hindsight. Tops only form retroactively. So you have to look probabilistically at whether you think a top is formed. Now, certainly a local top's formed. I even spoke about this in early January about the signs that Bitcoin was making a local top with the Wyckoff distribution scheme. I don't know if you remember that. Actually, it was around Christmas, Boxing Day, I think. Around that period, I did that video. But that doesn't mean that the ultimate cycle top is in. I still think there is a chance later in the year that we see, a big rally from Bitcoin where you still see, 120 to 140K. But in the meantime, there is a possibility that we trade a little bit below this 21 MA. And you actually see Will Clemente here inversing the chart, saying how people would say that this would look like a bullish chart. Obviously, though, if this pump continues, that would be bearish for Bitcoin. So actually looking at Bitcoin like this, you kind of get the feeling that it is going higher, so in this case lower, because it's an inverted chart, just based on momentum. But even on this chart, you haven't had a confirmed break, a confirmed close above this level, or on the real chart, not the inverted chart, a confirmed close below this level. So that's pretty much all you need to know about Bitcoin right now. It still hasn't confirmed, but it is flirting with danger. If Bitcoin did go to 80, would alts get hammered? Yes, they would keep getting hammered. But I think at a certain point, Bitcoin dominance stops going up because a lot of the front running of the selling on alts actually ends up taking place towards the beginning of a move. So if Bitcoin did keep on going down, most of the altcoin de-risking actually happens in this period. And then this period would actually be, in my opinion, mostly Bitcoin. And you could actually see dominance drop if that is the case. That's typically what does happen in these sell-offs. Alts react really aggressively in the beginning because people try and protect capital quickly. Obviously, alts have their own problems, though, which we'll speak about today as well. An interesting thing that I pointed out on my Twitter this morning was the fact that the S&P actually looks quite bullish. So there is a slight dislocation right now between the sentiment of the S&P and the sentiment of Bitcoin in the crypto market. It does make me wonder if the S&P did break trend, which it hasn't actually broken trend since 2023, what would happen to crypto? I personally think crypto is leading in this case, equities. You do see these periods in the market where crypto decorrelates. So if equities do exhibit weakness, there's a strong chance that by the time that's priced into the S&P and the NASDAQ, crypto is already starting to recover because, there's been many examples across the last few years of crypto actually front-running these equity sell-offs. You basically have to view altcoins and Bitcoin as extensions of tech stocks. So they're like levered tech stocks. It's like longing Apple on 20x leverage. That is essentially holding an altcoin. So these positions are really reflexive. The smallest move in the stock market can trigger a big sell-off, and the smallest move to the upside can trigger a massive pump. And that's definitely what we're seeing with this sell-off front-running equities. I wouldn't be surprised to see the S&P drop 15 to 20% at some point in the next 6 months, especially with all of this tariff stuff and I guess fears in the macro market. However, it still is in an uptrend, so I still think it does go higher and continues to make new highs. And if it does drop 15%, 10%, I don't think that is the death blow for crypto, you might think, of face value, because crypto has already front-run this. It's already expecting, I think, downside and is preempting downside on equities. And I'll explain why that's actually the case in a second here when I read out Fajal's tweet, which I think puts it into perfect words as to why there is a dislocation between expectations and fair market value at the moment. So why is this happening? Let's touch on the reasons overall why the altcoin market looks so weak and why Bitcoin looks so weak. The first reason, of course, is the tariff news. It seems like the worst reactions for crypto, so that liquidation cascade that we got a few weeks back and the cascade that we got today, are triggered by tariff news. The market really just hates tariff news. And the market's been really, really sensitive to things that Trump has come out and said that he'll do. It's kind of weird because Trump in so many ways is bullish for crypto in terms of the regulatory environment. We've never seen a pro-crypto president and a pro-crypto Congress and all the positive Bitcoin bills and legislation that's coming for crypto. But at the same time, markets really hate uncertainty. And Trump is pretty much the epitome of uncertainty because he wants to make big changes, and markets don't like change. They want constants. They want absolutes. Uncertainty and the fear of change causes volatility in the market. And this is why you're seeing knee-jerk reactions. So this was the trigger for the latest drop, but it isn't necessarily the root cause. It's only one factor in a much bigger piece. Now, there's specific altcoin factors which have made alts perform worse than Bitcoin, and there are specific macro factors which are affecting Bitcoin, which I'll touch on now. I'll read out for Giles Tweak as he does the best job at summarizing it. He says, what's happening in crypto right now is a resolution of the dislocation between expectations and fair value since the election in November. This is something we discussed and warned on the roundup on November 16th, and ever since, price has been flat/down, and there's no signs of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which is very different versus the expectations that were previously baked in. It's because of this concern for a potential dislocation that we've been on the defensive ever since the election, after being disgustingly bullish in the lead up to it. I even remember doing some videos about the Trump inauguration potentially being sell the news. It's crazy that it did, in fact, end up being sell the news. Obviously, the Trump meme coin thing kind of threw the market completely off base and made us all forget that that was the sentiment leading into the inauguration. The good news is this post-election premium is now being unwound. In fact, we're at pre-Trump levels now, so it's entirely been unwound, especially in alts. The bad news is this is happening during a time of relative equity strength. As traders, it's crucial to understand. I just want to make something clear, by the way. Bitcoin hasn't fully been unwound. Altcoins definitely have. They're way below pre-Trump levels, even Solana. But Bitcoin itself, if you do look at the chart here, has a little bit to go back to the election. It was like in the 70Ks at the time, I think 75K. And then it obviously ran up to 109K. So there's a bit of unwinding to go on Bitcoin if you want to use the election as a basis. But on altcoins, obviously, that they front ran and we're way below election lows. As traders, it's crucial to understand that markets are forward-looking, and you always need to be comparing expectations baked in versus reality. This is important to understand. Markets are always looking forward to potential outcomes, and the reason they knee-jerk on a little bit of uncertainty is because they are baking in that uncertainty ahead of time. That's why, markets are adaptive, especially a market like crypto, which is 24/7. It constantly adapts based on new information and calibrates based on the expectation of future outcomes. Anyway, I'm sad to see the state of things here right now, and hopefully not too many people were carried out here. I do think that now a lot of this dislocation has been resolved, that the worst is over, but that is dependent on positive macro environment, which I'm not sure of. Godspeed. So I think this is a really apt tweet because he's right. Basically, what's happened is there were expectations of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. There were expectations of all this pro-crypto policy. And although a lot of that is still happening, it didn't happen right away. And the market essentially front ran. The Trump inauguration got really excited, and we had this huge bid. Basically, it was the North Star. The North Star for the crypto markets was the Trump election. Now, since Trump's come in and we haven't got a strategic Bitcoin reserve, there's really no North Star anymore. Trump was such an obvious reason to long. You got to ask yourself, what's the obvious reason to long now? There's macro uncertainty. There's this tariff stuff. There's uncertainty with equities potentially pulling back. Like, people don't know what the North Star is. There's no clear directionality. There's no clear reason to bid. And when there's no clear reason to bid, people simply sell to play defensive. And that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin has had a drop. There's no North Star anymore. There's no Trump inauguration to look forward to. And there was a dislocation between what actually happened and what people expected with the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And fundamentally, this is the reason why we are getting a dip in the market. But that explains what's happening in Bitcoin. What's happening in altcoins themselves? Well, there's a few reasons why the dip for alts in general has been much, much, much worse. I think the reason this sell-off has been so brutal is because people have lost hope. Hope is what keeps markets, especially speculative markets like altcoins, intact. Once hope is lost, there's not much of a floor because a lot of these products don't really have real revenue or real believers. Most of these coins are being propped up by traders. You always have to ask yourself, who is actually buying this coin? Who would be willing to buy this coin at a future price? And the reality is, for many alts, as it turns out, no one. No one's willing to buy, but there's a lot of people willing to cash out and a lot of people willing to sell. And for that reason, there's been no floor on the prices of many alts. There aren't many real bidders for a lot of these alts, only speculators. So the reason this sell-off has been so brutal is because people have lost belief in alt season. People have lost belief in the crypto market. And when you lose belief, it's essentially like getting the rug pulled out of the crypto market. Now there's no floor, and prices just go down and down and down until you find a floor. And you only find a floor on certain alts when demand kicks in. So certain alts are going to do well and rebound. They're the ones that I've actually been buying right now that I'll speak about later in today's video. These will find a floor because there's real demand. There's real buyers where people will step in and buy heavily. There's one coin that I bought a lot of today because I personally believe in the coin intrinsically. So I'm an example of a buyer that is stepping in and providing a floor for that coin. Many other alts don't have that though. Like many memes, for example, there are no believers or whales stepping in with big clips to defend price because they just don't believe in it. And that's why some coins are on a path to zero now. We already know that, but you're definitely going to see a lot of alts literally at zero if they don't have that demand, if they don't have real bidders. Yes, there'll be short squeezes. Yes, there'll be bounces when people close their shorts and you see those bounces, but they aren't real buyers. It's people simply closing shorts or little squeezes here and there. It's just traders. So the only coins that are really going to recover and do really, really well out of this are the ones with real net buyers. And I think I've found a few that have real net buyers, which we'll talk about today. But you've got to be really wary of that when it comes to buying altcoins in this environment. And it explains why the sell-off has been so bad on a lot of alts. And I won't go too deep into the underlying mechanics because I did this yesterday in yesterday's show if you watched it. But the pump fund launch obviously caused a lot of altcoin dispersion and definitely contributed to a lot of capital leaving the space. It opened the door for bad actors. It opened the door for mass extractions, which took billions of dollars out of the market and meant that a lot of the quality products didn't receive the bids that maybe they should have. So the launch of Pump Fund, you can see here, was pretty much directly correlated with the death of the altcoin market. Now, I'm not blaming Pump Fund because in some ways, Pump Fund is a knee-jerk reaction to the VC-centric market that we've had, but it definitely hasn't been a good thing for the market, and it's why we never got a traditional-esque alt season. You can also make arguments that 2021 was an outlier, and that shouldn't even really be considered alt season because of the crazy environment with all of the stimulus that we have seen. The second reason, fundamentally, which I also talked about yesterday, that altcoins have struggled this cycle is because of the Bitcoin ETFs. Bitcoin ETFs have seen a lot of inflow, and because of that, because of the proportion of ETF bidding versus traditional Bitcoin bidding on centralized exchanges, there isn't a huge wealth effect from Bitcoin into large caps, mid caps, small caps like we've seen in previous cycles. So instead, Bitcoin's just going into the ETFs and it just stays in the TradFi system versus the last cycle where money, and even I did this, right? You'd buy Bitcoin on like Binance, for example. Then once you'd 2x your money, you had these profits and you'd go and you'd play with them. Oh, okay, I put in 10K, now I have 20K, I'm going to go put that 10K into Ethereum. And then you 2x on Ethereum and then you move down the risk curve. And that was like a fun game to play. And that's what created alt season. You don't have that this cycle. People are just buying the ETFs. That's it. There's no correlation with the altcoin market. So we wanted mass adoption. We wanted a bigger Bitcoin, but that came at a cost. And it came at the cost of the altcoin market, essentially. Now, there are still obviously products altcoins that are going to perform really well because they have product market fit. But we're entering this paradigm now where there's no more alt seasons. There's no more altcoins go up only. We're entering a paradigm where you really need to be selective about the alts that you hold, trade, and make sure that you're actually in products with product market fit and very strong communities. And that answer that question that I posed earlier in the video of who is actually going to buy this coin and who's going to buy at a higher price. Generally speaking, if you just use that as a framework, right? And every time you go to buy an alt, ask yourself, who's actually going to buy this off me? If you can answer that question and you have a good answer for it, strong chance you're actually in a good altcoin. I can't answer that for most alts in the market. I really can't. If I go through CoinGecko, I would struggle. But there are a few where occasionally, I'll look at it and I'll be like, look, I can see why people would buy this. Hyperliquid, I can see why people would buy that. It's a real revenue generating product. Sonic right now, I can see why people would buy that because you need it for the airdrop farming that's going to go all the way until June. There are other products as well. Tau, you need to buy Tau to stake it, and it's one of the leading AI coins. So there are coins where I look at them, I'm like, okay, there is someone that is probably going to come in and buy this coin. But a lot of others, like I look at a lot of memes, I'm like, who is actually going to buy this? Who is going to buy? And we'll get a mean reversion on whiff, right? We will, because that's what happens in markets. But who's realistically going to buy and hold whiff? I'm not sure. Whereas like an RWA coin, like CHEX or ONDO, like I can see why. It appeals to big institutions, it appeals to big funds, it appeals to potentially when they launch, future products, people that want to get exposure to the upside of those products. So when you start thinking about the market like this, it becomes much easier to pick the alts that you're holding long term, because no longer are you thinking in terms of speculation, you're thinking in terms of fundamentals. And that framework of asking yourself, who is actually going to buy this coin? Where is the demand coming from? Helps you do that. And there's one more reason before I get into whether I think it's a bottom and what alts I bought and all that sort of stuff, why the altcoin market has been doing so badly. And that is because there are a lot of extractions in the market, as Ari Paul points out, but there aren't enough daily fresh inflows to offset extractions. So there aren't that many liquid funds in the market. The majority of the VC market is comprised of early stage VC. Basically what this means is, you get in cheaper in a seed round, you have some sort of lockup, and then, the token launches at a certain valuation, you're able to sell. But like even the strongest new launches, like a bearer chain, which by the way, I think could actually do well in the short term, but I'm just using it as an example. There needs to be buyers, right? There needs to be people, as I said before, that are willing to step in and buy. There needs to be demand at, let's say, the $2 billion valuation it launches at. If not, well, there's certainly going to be demand for VCs to sell because they got in at 50 mil. So they're going to be offloading. And unless there's demand at 2 bill, price is going to keep going down until you find equilibrium. And for a lot of these coins, equilibrium is not at 2 bill or 1.5 or 1 or 500. It might be at 200 mil. So that's why you get a chart where a coin launches at 2 bill and ends up at 200 mil. It goes down 90%. It's just because there's not enough net inflows to satisfy demand, but there's a lot of demand to sell because VCs want to just cash their money, make a bag and reinvest elsewhere. Now, this works in an environment where there's more new capital coming in compared to new launches. However, most of the new capital coming in went into pump fund, got wrecked, it was extracted by grifters, and now those retail left the market because they got burnt. So now there isn't enough capital. There's not enough speculative capital even to prop up a lot of these new launches, which is why a lot of these new launches are really, really struggling. And ultimately, I think we need more liquid funds in the space, but liquid funds aren't going to come in and buy your trash off you. Liquid funds are going to also look to have an information asymmetry edge and get into protocols at an early stage and then market them so they become much bigger later. So even then, that's not going to solve the problem, but definitely there is a skew between the liquid markets and the private markets. And you know what? Nature's healing, because what happens eventually, right, is that the new launches do so bad that the VCs stop investing or valuations come down. And the VCs find an equilibrium where they are willing to invest in projects. And that means launch prices also come down. So this is capitalism. Markets are efficient. They're not totally efficient at all times, but they'll end up reaching an equilibrium where the market and the VC demand are calibrated. And that has been skewed for a long time, but over the next 12 months, we're going to see that recalibrate, which actually opens up a lot of opportunity if you are a VC, I think, because a lot of VCs are going to blow up, I think. A lot have really struggled this cycle. Everyone thinks VCs are they kind of have a bad name because they're viewed as the extractors. And although that's true to an extent, a lot of them have struggled. Like ZK Sing's underwater, Layer Zero's underwater. Like they've barely made returns. They might have made like 3x this cycle versus like 50x's last cycle. So a lot of them are really struggling, and we're going to see a lot of VCs dissolve. But as I said, nature's healing, and you come out the other side and the more serious players stick around and valuations recalibrate, and a lot of opportunities open up as well in the new launch market because tokens launch at lower values, which allows for better price discovery on these coins. So eventually it'll even out, and the market just will continue to adapt, but it's a bit of a painful process until we get there. And that process is very evident when you look at the altcoin charts right now, and it's one of the reasons why the market's struggling. There's just not enough new inflows to match the dispersion in the market. Now, let's speak more about the current price action. Do I think it's a bottom? Well, Rand does. Rand says we are at or near a bottom. And I definitely get this sentiment. I think although there is obviously that, 80K level that we discussed and the potential for a confirmed breakdown here, there is at least some compelling reason to suggest that this could be a local bottom, at least in the short term, starting to form. And that's purely just based on the fear in the market. So for the first time, we actually have the fear and greed index in extreme fear for Bitcoin. We haven't had this in months. So I've been checking in on this regularly. Yesterday was neutral. Last week was neutral. This is the first day we have extreme fear on Bitcoin. And I would say really, really extreme fear in the altcoin market as well, with the altcoin season index going from altcoin season to almost Bitcoin season. I actually think once you get down here, that's the best place to buy alts. Like some alts might be okay to buy now, but if we ever get down here, that's when you'd probably sell the farm to buy altcoins and then just reverse trade it, because eventually it'll go back to alt season. Like this always happens, right? It goes Bitcoin. This has been oscillating for years. It's going to be no different this time. If you're in the right alts, if you can buy alts down here, the right alts will always make money up here, but it's just become harder to actually pick the right assets this cycle. But in terms of whether we're near or at a bottom, I can't say, but I definitely see why Rand's saying this. And for that reason, I have added some positions today, because there is a chance this is deviation below range low and we'll end up picking back up and reclaiming, having an acceptance back within the range at 91K. And then this will be a great buying opportunity. But obviously there are no expectations there. I do want to talk about my slightly longer term views on the market though before I pivot back to my short term views on the market and what I've been doing today. I personally believe, and I got a bit of hate for this on Twitter, but I can probably explain it better on YouTube. I personally believe we're in the anger phase. Now, this Wall Street cheat sheet is kind of misconstrued, because this doesn't represent the overall cycle necessarily. If we are in this new paradigm where there's no 4-year cycle, I don't think there's a 4-year cycle anymore, you can have multiple of these. You can have one of these every 6 months, right? So I think the local cycle is done, and I think we're entering a new cycle. And in this new cycle, many of the old altcoins will be irrelevant, and there'll be new altcoins and new narratives, and some established ones, which we'll speak about today, that will do really, really well. And this will obviously also be correlated to Bitcoin price action. So I think on altcoins overall and the cycle overall, to me, I think we're around the anger phase. Now, of course, this is very subjective. It's not an objective measure of the market. But the reason I say anger is because a lot of people are angry. They're pissed off. They're complaining. If I look at anxiety, denial, panic, I don't think any of these really match where we currently are. I think, in fact, a lot of people are already in depression. So I think what comes next after this move settles, maybe it'll settle lower. Maybe it'll end up consolidating around here and eventually end up recovering. No matter where it settles, I think slightly longer term, from a cycle perspective, we are entering, in my opinion, the depression phase. Just my opinion. I don't think we're in hope yet. I don't think we're in denial. I think we're a little bit worse than that in terms of the severity of the move. This depression phase will happen once the low is in. And once the low is in, the market will chop sideways for a period of time. It'll shake a lot of people out. And that last shakeout will lead to the birth of a new mini cycle where select alts perform really well and Bitcoin performs really well again. Now, if I had to guess, in terms of timelines, I think this will play out over summer this year, so summer in the Northern Hemisphere, so June, July, August, and we will see heading into Q3, Q4, quite a big recovery on Bitcoin and alts. So my framework now is we'll put in a bottom over the next couple of weeks. It could be as soon as today, it could be, I don't know, or it could be in a week or so and we go slightly lower and maybe tap that 80K zone. Once again, I don't know, but I think in terms of timeline, we'll put in a low within the next couple of weeks. We'll probably have some mean reversion. We'll get a big bounce at some point. We could get a bounce in a couple of days if the low's in today, but we will get a big bounce at some point. Obviously, on that bounce, you can readjust positions if you hadn't done that already. And then I think the market consolidates, goes through this depression phase for a while until coming out the other side much stronger. Now, I don't think we'll come out until post-summer, really, really strong. Of course, we could still have a little run in between now and summer. That's not to say the market's dead until Q3. There are going to be opportunities to make money. There are going to be bounces. There are going to be all sorts of things happening over the next few months. But in terms of that big Bitcoin new all-time high and another big altcoin run, I think we're probably now looking at the end of the year. And now, if you asked me that 3 months ago, I would have said we're looking maybe at Q2. Now I'm saying we're looking more towards Q3 just because everything's been pushed back. So it's not a matter of flip-flopping. It's a matter of just seeing the signs, seeing the price action, seeing the sentiment, and getting the new macro data and recalibrating based on where I think we currently are in the cycle right now. No one can predict the markets. So you'll never know when a top is in, and you'll never know exactly where you are in the cycle until it's already happened. It's a retroactive game, but you can go in with a framework and a rough idea of when things might improve, and that's the rough framework that I have, slightly longer term. Truthfully, though, it doesn't really matter too much whether we're in depression, anger, disbelief, panic, because some of the alts that I'm accumulating, the way I'm structuring my portfolio, I'll speak about how I'm doing that in a couple of minutes. It doesn't really rely on this to play out exactly. The way that I'm trading at the moment, looking at acceptance back into high time frame support levels, so reclaims, and looking at clear tests of major high time frame support levels on alts, that kind of protects me against even needing to play the cycle because I have technical parameters in place. And for the coins that I am buying, spot, maybe not totally based off the technicals, because there are a few outliers, those are coins that I think have a marginal buyer somewhere out there. They're coins that I think will have demand coming from somewhere, like that buy demand that I spoke about before, that's going to hold them in good stead irrespective of their TA. But there's only maybe 3 or 4 coins in the market which I think fit that bill right now for me. And we'll discuss a few of them today. And those coins I'm actually not so worried about. Whenever they run, but I believe that they have the right product market fit and they have the potential to have future demand when the market does pick up. So I don't need to time exactly when the market is going to pick up. Okay, so Rand says we're at or near a bottom. For me, I don't even really care if we're at or near a bottom because my rule is to buy extreme fear, and this is extreme fear. So we don't need to predict whether Bitcoin's going to close below the range and head trend towards 80, or we don't need to predict whether we're going to deviate in 2 days and end up reclaiming. Because for me, today was red enough, the liquidation cascade was big enough, and the discounts on some alts were big enough to make some moves as long as the technicals aligned. So I did a bit of shopping today. I made some of my biggest buys in around a month, and I'll go through some of the altcoins that I'm buying or looking at, because I'm not being rash. I'm not aping in like a crazy person. I'm being very selective about what I'm buying. The first coin that I bought today is Hey ANON. There are some amazing things coming for ANON. I don't know if they're announced yet, but later in the week, there's a big product update that's coming. I've got a podcast with Daniela also coming. That's going to be really, really good. You'll see why I'm fundamentally bullish on this, I think, once that podcast releases, because you'll understand what he's actually building. I had a chance to hang out with him over the weekend and learnt a lot about his vision, and I'm just backing the man. I think there's huge potential with the vision for this. I mean, it's the ChatGPT of crypto, essentially, is what ANON is. It's an interface for all trading, all DeFi. You won't even really need to use exchanges anymore. You'll just go onto the app, on the App Store, on your phone, and trade. And that's a cool use case. That is product market fit, exemplified. Now, obviously, they need to execute. It's not going to be easy. It's a difficult product to build, but I think they have the tools to do it. And I think Daniela is the right guy, and he's a visionary to actually be able to pull it off. And for that reason, I've been buying more. I'm already an advisor to ANON, but I've been buying a lot more than my advisory value on the liquid market. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think after the big sell-off, A, it's shown relative strength, but B, I think there is a bit of a dislocation here between market cap and the potential of the technology. And I think AI is also going to come back at some point. So I want exposure to a couple AI coins. So Hey ANON's definitely one of them. And that's why I added to that today. With a decent amount of size, I made some big buys today. And look, if it does go lower, if it goes to $4, I don't really care. I'll buy more at $4. For me, this is a long-term play. This isn't a short-term trade. You obviously can trade the chart. And if you want to do that, and if you're more of a trader, trade with invalidations. I'm just telling you how I'm doing it. For me, this is a fundamental play. I'm not so worried about the TA. And it's one of the very few coins that's in that category for me right now, because the rest of the market, I am, paying a lot of attention to TA. But obviously, the bigger the coin, and Hey ANON's not on centralized exchanges. It's on a few, but not the big ones. The bigger the coin, the more centralized exchanges it's on, the more TA actually has efficacy, because more people are looking at the levels, right? Which makes them a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the other AI coin that I'm looking at, I haven't bought yet, but I'll tell you the scenarios that I'll buy now, is Tau. I think Tau, as a bit of a safer, so to speak, AI play, is quite a good one. It actually looks pretty good. You have your higher lows. Now there's this low, which I think at 340, that would be a great bid zone. There are 2 levels I would buy Tau. 340, you can set your inval below this wick at 300, inval at around 298. If you want to have a spot invalidation, if you're doing low leverage, same thing, but you need to be a bit more careful with your entry in that case. Or if you don't want to bid this level, you can wait for acceptance back above $400, and this would be a nice zone, and you might get that diagonal break, which takes us higher to 500, 600. This isn't going to be a play that makes you a 5x, but as an altcoin that I want to be in for a 2, 3, 4x, Tau, I think fits the bill and has strong fundamentals behind it. And I've also been, investing in the ecosystem and all that sort of stuff over the past couple of weeks. So you'll notice I'm very focused on specific narratives right now because they're the ones that I think will come back and do well. RWA as well, I think will do well. Let me pull up the CHEX chart right now because this one's interesting. We actually got the wick down to a major support level this morning, but this literally lasted for like 5 seconds. I think it was just someone being stupid on Solana. But if you did manage to catch that, good job. Now, I think this is a potential zone where you can ladder in if you want long-term checks. 32 and 25 are the two zones to ladder in. Obviously, the invalidation zone that I spoke a lot about on the channel, also in the Discord, was 40 cents. So a lot of you would have cut, including myself, a portion of my position was cut at 42. And then now I'm looking at rebuying a bit at 32 and again at 25. That's my plan with CHEX. So RWA AI, still bullish on the leaders, but not longing everything, only longing things with very solid fundamentals and things that I intrinsically believe in it and I'm ultimately willing to hold down. So if you're buying spot altcoins right now, you're basically accepting that, okay, you don't know whether Bitcoin's going to reclaim. You're buying almost mentally willing to see it draw down further. If you're buying spot today, that's what you're telling yourself. If not, you're better off just trading, and I'll show you what the trading setups right now look like. Sonic is another one that intrinsically I think is interesting because obviously you need it to farm the airdrop. A lot of the LPs are reliant on Sonic. Now, I think this has a fair bit of sell pressure around the $1 zone. We saw it reject off that earlier, but I think a mean reversion back to 85 to $1 can happen quite quick. On the log Ichimoku cloud, it's approaching the bottom. This is another indicator, a bit more of a high time frame moving average that I like to use. It did break down below the money noodle. So you have two kind of bid zones, I think, 65 and then again at 60 if you get there. That's your lower bid zone. But what you can also do is open up the hourly chart and look at a potential pivot. So this is the low. And if you get a reclaim here, you can trade that and potentially look at the 1 hour flip of the money noodle back into 84 cents. So this is an interesting one to trade. I know Paradise has been trading it a lot in the Discord. Solana is another one that I added some spot today at this level here, around $128, I believe it was. But this is a major support level. You've got inval below. Obviously, if you're using leverage, you want to be really tight with that entry. Spot anywhere in this region at support, you've got inval below at around $108 to $110. I don't think it's going to go that much lower than 120, honestly. So that's just what I think. So for me, this is like a very strong high time frame bid zone on Solana. And then there are coins like Hyperliquid, which I fundamentally believe in, but I don't like the PA. So Solana's at a high time frame level, right? I felt better buying this morning than I do buying Hyperliquid, which is just broken down. So for a coin like this, I have cash ready to enter, but what I want is acceptance back above the $19 level over the next few days. So it might look like this. It might, fill the wick to the bottom, come back up, retest, consolidate. Happy to buy a bit higher, even around $20, just to get back into that range. So a lot of alts right now, I am waiting for a reclaim of their support resistance levels. So I'm not really bidding any coins that recently broke high time frame structure. There are like a couple exceptions in the market where I'll actually do that. But the majority of coins, I'm waiting for them to either hit a high time frame support resistance level like we saw on Solana, or I'm simply waiting for a show of strength and reclamation like Hype, ENA, even Tau. You can simply wait, maybe pay a little bit of a premium, but get an official confirmation back on their high time frame support level, resistance flipped back into support. So I don't think there's a need to catch knives right now. Yes, it's a good day, in my opinion, to DCA into some stuff you really fundamentally believe in for your long-term high conviction spot portfolio. But that is your very long-term portfolio. On your trading portfolio, or even on your medium-term spot portfolio, I think there's no need to catch knives in the market, and you can wait for reclaims and just be a little bit patient and see what ends up playing out in the market. I don't want to blow all my load today, trying to time a bottom, because I'm also aware of what I spoke about earlier in the show, that there is this gap at 78 to 80. So I'm going to be a little bit prepared and a little bit pragmatic and not blow my entire load on a bunch of alts today and only see them bleed out further. So the market is not about, absolutes like, oh, this is the bottom, so I'm loading up. It's about, no, if there are select alts with good setups that you believe in, you can take those setups and then you can be patient with others. There are other coins which I like Hyperliquid and ENA, but I'm just waiting for them to reclaim levels that I'd be interested in buying. Like ENA, for example, you have the support level. If we do go down to 35, I would bid there, by the way. This is the level that I would bid. Or you can wait for a reclaim at 46, pay a little bit of a premium, but have this cup and handle, which will potentially play out and bring you back to 70 cents if the market recovers. So this kind of takes the guesswork out of it, at least playing off momentum, I think. The worst thing you can do, I think, in this market is catch knives. And lastly, the final thing I'm doing right now is keeping tabs on what is showing relative strength. So L1s have shown a lot of relative strength. If the market rebounds, a lot of them are going to be first. I'm thinking like the Says, the Suis, the Sonics, the 3Ss, Solana, the 4Ss. These will probably have strong mean reversions. You can also see that derivative tokens, AI agents, privacy, like a lot of utility stuff is in the frame to bounce quite strongly. If you want to hone it in even further than just a broad look at narratives, you can actually look at where money's flowing. And right now it's clear that Base, Sonic, Arbitrum, and Bearer have the strongest inflows. So Bearer and Sonic are probably the two most obvious networks that you can look at bidding. I'm still doing a lot of farming on Sonic, so I didn't actually de-risk my Phantom on the breakdown, or it's called Sonic now, because I have a lot of it just farming, and I'm fine to accept a slight drawdown on some of my LPs because I'm earning high APR and I'm going to get an airdrop in June. And I think because the airdrop's still quite far away, there's still a bit of a passive bid that's happening for Sonic, which answers that question which I asked before. Is there going to be a buyer of this coin? That is a really important thing to ask yourself. And I think for Sonic, the answer is probably yes, which is why I continue to be a buyer into the support levels that I discussed before. And it's not all doom and gloom, guys. There are still opportunities in this market. There are lots of dislocations right now which create opportunities. Like, I think ANON's a slight dislocation. I don't think people have realized what they're building versus their market cap. I think what happens in a bearish market like this is because no one's reacting to good news, projects will make good announcements or there'll be really strong developments, but price won't react. Whereas in November, a lot of these tokens would have already just flown because people are salivating, waiting for good news and then aping. But right now, even coins with the most bullish announcements, they aren't being aped because people don't have the confidence to put money into the market. So there's lots of dislocations or asymmetries which you can take advantage of right now, and that's certainly something that I'm doing. So it's certainly not doom and gloom, there's still opportunities, and Danielle has summed it up here. He has a philosophy as a builder that he just wants to outperform in tech, outperform in working hours, outperform in ideas, outperform in deliverables. You're the exact same. You can't affect the market right now. You can't control the uncontrollables. All you can control is what's in front of you. And that's outperforming with your portfolio, outperforming in terms of upskilling, outperforming in terms of ideas, outperforming in terms of networking, whatever it is for you. Whether it's becoming a better trader, whether it's doing more research, whether it's doing more networking, whether it's creating crypto content, whatever it is, all you can do is control what you can control. And as a content creator, that's my real focus right now. I'm waking up, I can control making an amazing video. Hopefully you thought this video was amazing. If you did, smash the like button and subscribe. But all I can control is making this a video that I'm proud of, right? All I can control is writing a thread that I'm proud of. All I can control is researching ecosystems that I'm interested in and being disciplined in the market instead of relying on motivation. I've been digging really deep into Sonic. I've been digging really deep into DeFi again. I can control that. I can't control whether the market nukes, but I definitely can control how I upskill, how I continue to grow my brand, how I continue to grow my portfolio, how I execute on trades, how I become a better trader. I can control all of that right now. So it's not really the market to run away. I know some of you might feel like running away. It's actually the market to continue getting better and better and better and better, because when the market does turn, and it will inevitably turn, you'll be in a much better position than all these tourists who are just leaving the market now and capitulating, which I don't really understand personally, because there's so much opportunity during these times that you'd be mad to just stick around for the bullish markets and not be around for markets like this where all these dislocations present opportunities. So That's just my opinion. And if you do want to join me on that journey, I'll be here tomorrow as well, and the day after for some more banger content for you guys to help guide you through this market. And I'm going to continue grinding every single day, outperforming in what I can control. I'll see you in the next one. Have a lovely rest of your day. Peace out, guys.